People who've operated the network cameras at major sporting events. What's the wildest thing you've captured that the network wouldn't air? Back in the 80s, we had a VCR tape that was put together by the crews that worked the sporting events back in the day. My dad's best friend was an engineer that did that kind of work. There was people screwing, people running across the field with giant fake dongs, naked people, BJs, topless girls in the infield at races, a drunk naked dude running and jumping in the mud in the infield, oh, and more banging. There was depravity I had not seen at that point in my life. I wish we still had that tape. Story 2. I was shooting a Big Ten football game in 2011, and I saw a gentleman in the stands who appeared to be drunk. He was standing up at his seat, waving back and forth and kind of stumbling. I turned the camera on him because I thought it was kind of funny. Then, all of a sudden, he just fell over. The people next to him jumped on him and started doing CPR. I stopped rolling immediately. He had had a massive heart attack. EMTs came and carried him out on a stretcher and put him in an ambulance. The worst feeling in the world was watching the ambulance just sit in the tunnel for a long time and not turn its lights on. He had already died. It was frickin' horrible, and I felt like a huge jerk for not realizing what was going on. It still really bothers me. I'm certified in CPR now, in part because of that experience. OP, you can't beat yourself up too much for this one. You just wouldn't know. It's hard to tell when these kinds of things are happening up close, let alone far away on a camera. That super sucks that happened, though. Story 3. Not sports. Worked at a regional station. News broadcast with a female guest. No underwear and short skirt. Nobody noticed until the producer mentioned she had nice legs. Try and get them in shot. Followed by an, oh crap, scrap that. We broadcasted lady parts for less than 10 frames and got hundreds of complaints. Still makes me laugh. Story 4. Back in the 90s, before they blew up the Kingdome, there was a file of compiled footage of all the people sneaking up to the 300 level nosebleeds and banging, but it was all sped up to 3 times. I think it made its circles around the UW Tech undergrad community for years. The Kingdome 300 level was pretty legendary. Unless the Yankees or some other big name team was in town, it was completely deserted. People got arrested for getting naked in the restrooms and just hanging out. Story 5. When I was a kid, my dad was a camera operator for the local public access channel, and he would volunteer to record the Sunday sermons at our church. I often got to sit with him in the camera room and mostly watch, but hey, sometimes help. Occasionally, he would let me operate one of the boards to record the children's sermon, where all the children in the congregation would go to the front and sit on the dais, and the minister would tell them a story before they went to Sunday school. My job was to pan through the group of kids and find the ones that were goofing off and cut to them for a couple of seconds and then back to the group shot. The funniest one we caught was a kid who was standing, bent over, just waving his butt in the air, waving it at all the other kids, waving at the congregation, etc. It was hilarious. We figured it would be inappropriate to include that in the taping, though, so we didn't use it. Just a quick note, no clue if I said dies correctly. D-A-I-S. You tell me. Story 6. Never done sports, but I work in corporate AV. I've seen corporate Christmas parties get completely out of hand. Booby cam, fights, banging on the dance floor, general shenanigans. Heard mics left open while people were unaware and going to the washroom or making petty or rude remarks. But the winner was one of the first huge events my former employer did in 2002. First anniversary party celebrating the merger of 2 energy companies into one mega company. 2,500 plus people, 6 15 by 20 screens, 2,000 feet of P&D, 6 cameras, bands, acrobats, F&B, the works. Months of planning, a week of setup, and 3 days of teardown for one 5-hour gig. They hired acrobats from Cirque du Soleil to perform throughout the party. One of them we shall call Balloon Dancer. Balloon Dancer did a routine where she did acrobatics on a pair of ribbons suspended from a giant helium balloon 40 or so feet in the air. Balloon Dancer wore a sheer red bodysuit over a pair of shorts and bandeau top. During her routine, the bandeau top rolled down, exposing her breasts to the crowd on 6 15 by 20 screens. The switcher-op only noticed after about 20 seconds that she was upside down and topless and started calling for different camera shots. But all the cameras were of course focused on the action. Story 7. Not a camera op, but crew at the event. I was doing the tech rehearsal for a major sport team starting in my season. We had gone through most of the show, the flags came out, my crew dropped our staging, we all wanted to leave. I had a date to run off to. They run all the graphics by the Jumbotron and we're about to strike everything, and over the radio comes, "Okay, we're gonna test the doves." Everyone starts looking around, and out of one field entrance comes 12 white doves. Then a shot rang out. This arena had the best acoustics in the world. This noise sounded just like a gunshot. We all look up and see the announcer's window shaking and 2 or 3 doves falling to the ground. Then we see the culprit. Some hawks who make their home in the arena are taking a well-deserved meal from the show. Not one of those doves made it out that day. And for the next hour or so, the cameramen at the arena were following the hawks around as they unalived and ate the poor doves. It was fascinating to see the birds pick up and fly and hide the birds so they can eat in peace. Also, at the end of the day, the doves were cut from the opening ceremonies. The doves were cut? Wow. I never would have guessed. Story 8. I've been working with the same crew for a long time and we practically chat through our headsets during the entire game. There have been many laugh out loud moments, and my director would purposely take my camera when I would be laughing from a funny comment someone made in the headset. I would try so hard to hold the camera still and be focused, but all you would see is the camera shaking from hearty laughter on my part, even the cameras that are not on your shoulders. It's super easy to shake it when you're laughing and zoomed in on a player. Story 9. I work for an AV company, and one of the things some of my coworkers do is create bingo cards based off our predictions and the theme of the event. In order to get the bingo space, they have to be captured on camera live on the big screen and we have to pan away from it. Our most frequent occurrences are girls flashing the camera when they see themselves on the big screens, chubby men who also flash the camera, gay men in Daisy Dukes who jump and jostle themselves out of their shorts, kiss cam couples that get handsy, and catching unsuspecting people digging for gold like their lives depended on it. Hey now, OP, those could be perfectly straight men in Daisy Dukes. I'll admit, the odds aren't good, but they could be. Story 10. Not a camera operator, but had all the feeds from the cameras as you would in the truck while doing live streaming for a bunch of major events. NFL football games pretty much always featured a couple of fistfights and usually some flashing. FIFA had tons of naked people pretty much all the time. Honestly, the nudity in the fights and stuff just become routine really fast. A funny one that is sort of in the spirit of this thread was listening to Chris Berman and some other announcer who I can't remember while watching the feed of some guy taking a pee on the golf course that the camera was holding on. They laughed for a long while and then it just got weird. The guy was taking an epic pee. I mean, Tom Hanks in a League of Their Own kind of epic. Berman went from thinking it was hilarious to this can't really be happening and back to it was hilarious because it went on so long. To top it off, not only was this guy completely hammered at something like 9:30 in the morning, but also totally out in the open. I mean, making no attempt to hide at all. People were walking past him and either just pretending it wasn't happening or just sort of scurrying past him. And it was a major event, I can't remember which one, but it was a big deal like the Masters or one of the other majors for sure. A less funny one, but something I will never forget, is the Red Bull Stratus jump. We had all the telemetry from the suit as well as the feed, and when he went into that flat spin, there was a good 10 seconds we thought he was dead. Not like going to be dead, but actually dead, because we lost all telemetry. It came back before we pulled the plug on the stream, and obviously he made it, but that was a tense 10 seconds. The kind of 10 seconds that feels like an hour. Oh, and this one seemed like nothing, but then it was devastating. We were doing the Winter Olympics the year the poor guy on the luge crashed and actually died, but that one made it to air. We pulled it from every replay later, and obviously no one knew how bad it was at the time, but it was pretty crazy for a while. Accidentally televising someone's death is something I would constantly be afraid of if I were doing events like the luge. That is definitely traumatizing, I guess. I can't think of any other way to say it. Story 11. I was on camera 9 at a baseball game, which means in about 99% of all scenarios, my camera isn't getting used. All I'm doing is scanning the crowd on the opposite side for babies, fathers with their sons, happy couples, stuff they can cut to fill airtime in between innings and stuff. Every now and then there would be a pop fly and I got to trace that to whoever caught it. And sometimes pan to the dugout, but it was really just a crowd camera for when they hit home runs. So I'm panning through people as the pitcher is setting up his next throw, and the director goes, "Wow, camera 9, get a close-up for the girl in the pink shirt." So I do, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that she had 36 triple Q breasts barely covered by this pink tank top. I get a close-up of her, and he says, "Okay, lock it down." So I do. Sat there for the next 45 minutes with nothing happening, because baseball is extremely boring to film, and I got paid to look at breasts. Ended up getting brought back, he liked my work so much. Also had a close-up of a kid and his mom as he threw up on her, and that didn't make it to air. Story 12. Not a cameraman, but I was at a Nebraska game a few years back, and they were getting shots of the crowd on the jumbo screen at one point. They get a nice shot of a dude holding up a big sign saying, "Go Black Shirts," or something like that. Within seconds of him realizing he's on camera, he lets that sign drop, and right behind it is another one that says, "Bang her right in the kitty," written larger than life on it. You've never seen a camera pan away faster in your life. Everyone in my section looked at each other for a few seconds, asking ourselves, did we just see that? Story 13. Back in 2004, I worked for the Denver Broncos as a sideline video journalist, with my video airing on the NFL Network and DenverBroncos.com. Being from Denver, it was a dream come true. I had a lot of video that was great but would never get aired. Everything from overly enthusiastic Raiders fans shouting obscenities at and brawling with each other while tailgating, to a Chiefs fan flashing me in the parking lot. A lot happens at NFL games, and drunk people do some very unexpected things when you point cameras at them. My two favorite stories were not from when I had the camera rolling, however. In one of our first preseason games, we played Buffalo in Buffalo. I was new to the team and still a bit starstruck myself. I was on the field decked out in Broncos gear, team polo, hat, etc. before the game started, just standing on the sideline and enjoying watching the team warm up. Two young Bronco fans, maybe 6 or 7, caught my eye and started frantically waving me over to them. I smiled and walked over and was tickled when they asked me for my autograph. I asked them if they knew who I was, and they said no, of course, but they didn't care. They just wanted someone's autograph. I laughed and signed their ticket stubs, and to this day it makes me giggle thinking that someone out there has my autograph, and a likely very silly childhood memory. My second favorite memory is a bit more scandalous. We were in San Diego playing the Chargers, and once again I was down on the field pre-game. This was the year that SoCal native Ruben Drones was tearing up the league, and we had a sizable fanbase turnout. A smoking hot blonde in the front row caught my eye, winked at me, and beckoned me to come over. Obviously, I went without hesitation. "Hi," she said with a sensual grin. "Do you know Ruben? Do you think you could get him to sign something for me?" I knew him well enough to ask if he was up for it, but in pregame it was hit or miss whether or not he would. I can try," I said. "What do you want signed?" She handed me a white G-string with a Broncos logo on it. It was still warm. With a laugh, I handed them back and said, "I'll ask." I walked over to where he was standing and pointed out the woman before telling him about the request. He laughed, gave her a huge wave and smile before telling me, "Hell no, man." Story 14. Not 100% to the question, but I worked at a major news outlet that had done a story that a small group of people didn't like, so we had maybe 30 people outside protesting. They had crudely made signs on sticks and were kind of doing a circle like you see union protesters do. One of the cameramen was filming it from where we were outside of a second-floor window. One guy seemed to be walking slower than the rest, and had trouble keeping the nicely spaced circle, and people kinda bunched up naturally around him. Out of nowhere, the guy just projectile vomits, hitting a few other protesters, and everyone is a mixture of grossed out and confused. Suddenly, the circle of protesters breaks up and people are running in every direction. And 2 minutes later, no protest. A pile of puke is the only evidence anyone was ever there. We watched that video over and over. The editing team slowed it down, put it to music, etc. I've never laughed so much in my life. Best time in an otherwise stressful job. OP, how am I supposed to believe that Mr. Vomit wasn't actually a plant from the station? They're like, we've had enough of this protest. I know just what'll stop it. Really, though? It's a surefire way to break up a protest. But no, I don't actually think the station did that. I'm not crazy. Just hopeful. Story 15. Worked for a network that was televising the 2013 Boston Marathon. The crew was about to go live with our coverage when they heard a loud noise and the truck. One of the crew came over the headset and said a bomb had gone off. Everyone booked it out of there. We record all the cameras into a playback server called an EVS. The EVS records all the cameras so they can be used for slow motion replays or cut clips together for a video package. All the bombing footage was recorded there, some of it pretty gory. The worst was the guy getting wheeled away holding his guts in with his hands. The FBI came and had us scan all the footage before they confiscated it. One of the clips showed the Tsarnaev brothers right behind our on-air talent during an on-camera interview. The FBI grilled our poor talent if he knew them and why they were in the shot. Story 16. Not a camera op, but I work with a marathon company doing timing. We have photographers on course every few miles or so. The photographers turn in their SD cards at the end of the day with all the pictures on them. Then these several tens of thousands of pictures are automatically sorted by participants. The software reads the participant number on the bibs, then assigns it to the participant. No human is curating the photos, which can occasionally lead to problems. Anyway, we got an email once from a man who was unhappy because his dong was hanging out of his shorts. It's also semi-common for runners to lose control of their bodily functions. So every once in a while we get an email from someone asking us to remove the picture of crap running down their legs. I know you sign a release form or something like that when doing a marathon for stuff like this, but I don't know if I would want to. I don't trust myself to be photogenic enough all the time for me to be happy. I think at least one picture is getting in there that I hate. It doesn't even have to be this bad, although that would also suck. Story 17. Not a cameraman, but my father loved telling a story about watching the Cowboys get blown out at home sometime in the 70s. It's the fourth quarter, and they're at the point where the cameras are panning across the stands, showing that everyone's gone home. They zoom in on one guy sitting all alone way up in the cheap seats. He sees the camera, grimaces, raises his fist, and flips America the bird. Everything freezes. And after a moment, the commentator says, "And that's how we say we're number one here in the great state of Texas." Story 18. Not TV, but my old high school had a radio station that I was a DJ for. When Viva La Bam was still a thing, we somehow got Don Vito to come in for an interview to our little suburban town. The whole thing was absolute chaos. He was drunk and slurring and couldn't be understood. He was asking the high school kid interviewing him for a beer. Since he showed up towards the end of the school day, hundreds of kids were outside and following him for a bit. This made him jump into the back seat of my SO's best friend's car and he yelled, "Get me out of here," to her. In the days of scripted reality TV, I can confirm that Don Vito is not an actor. Also, Bam himself got snowed in once in our little town and did donuts in his Lamborghini at our Home Depot that made it on air. Also, Doosan Man, what? I have no idea who these people are, so I don't get it, and the voice I did was probably way off. I do love the idea of a reality TV celebrity coming on and getting interviewed for a high school and showing up drunk and asking for a beer, though. Just goes to show that sometimes those people, yeah, as Opie said, not acting. They're just really out of touch with what reality is. Story 19. The tape is almost certainly destroyed by now, but a theater production I worked on in college had a crazy opening night. We were doing a production of Hair, and there was a scene where they asked the cast to be naked. They would be concealed behind a scrim, and with the way the lighting was done, only silhouettes would be seen. The cast was terribly nervous, and it took a ton of convincing for them to do it. It was practiced clothed a million times. After a few dress rehearsals, the cast was more at ease. On opening night, jitters were a bit higher amongst the crew. We really hadn't done a lot of complete run-throughs on the lighting or sound, but these were actual professionals running the stage. We were hearing over the radio that the cast was pretty apprehensive about getting naked and getting up on the scaffolding of the set, and we were hearing stage crew helping them out. The theater goes dark, the cast gets into place, and the lights come back on. Except someone had miscued a light behind the scrim. Now, sometimes that's an effect you want to achieve, but in this case, it caused the entire cast to be seen clear as day through the scrim and completely naked. They weren't entirely aware at the time of what was happening, but the crew was in chaos trying to fix it, and once they started singing, well, the show must go on. I was thoroughly amused. I gotta say, as someone who graduated from a theater program, don't love the whole thing of the cast had to be super convinced to do this. That's usually coercion in some way. People aren't comfy with that kind of stuff. Getting a whole cast to do it for a college production? Weird. But my theater boy gripes aside, that is truly unfortunate. I know exactly what OP is describing, and I'll try to describe it. So it's the scrim, just think of like a thin sheet towards the back of the stage. And being lit from the front, you would mostly see silhouettes of what's behind it. Being lit from the back, you would see what's behind it, I think, is what's happening here. I was an actor, I didn't do lighting, I did sound and on-stage stuff, you know? So I think I get it. But yes, everyone being exposed, as it were, unlucky. Anyway, that's all the stories we have for today, so I hope you enjoyed them. And I also hope you have a wonderful day or night. I will see you in the next one.